Hello, everybody. Welcome to our latest virtual bourbon event. This is our flagship whiskey event, which truly is the flagship of the events that we do. This is one that came out initially right away when we started doing virtual bourbon events on Zoom, and it has proven to be our most popular event by far. So we do these every other month, and they always sell out. And we have, at this point now, we're talked to over 60 distillers on this program. So that's pretty cool. And we have a great group tonight. We are going to be talking to our individuals individually, but I think it's always good to start out and go ahead and introduce our guests that will be on. So we'll start out with doing that, and then we'll kind of get to the individual interviews and the tasting. So first up, from Wyoming Whiskey, a co-founder in the company, David DeFazio out of Kirby, Wyoming. Hey, David, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you, Steve?
I'm doing great as well. Really looking forward to this. I think you guys have an incredible history, and it'll be fun to talk a little bit about that. I don't know how much people know about your company and this group, so it'll be fun getting to know what you got going on a little bit. And your product's pretty widely available too, so great opportunity if people like what they're tasting. Probably a chance to go out and get it at their local store. Correct?
Correct.
Yeah. You guys have some great distribution. We'll talk about that and much more in just a minute here. We'll follow this order, so you'll be up first when we begin the interviews.
Thanks, sir.
Next up, out of Brooklyn, New York, is Alex Clark, the founder of Fort Hamilton Distillery. Hey, Alex, how you doing, man?
Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, been following you a little bit on social media, and you're kind of just getting rolling right now. And it looks like you're doing some cool stuff, right?
Yes. Yeah. Getting rolling in the whiskey sense. In other words, right. Been doing it for about 6 years, but yeah. It's starting to have some juice. It's pretty tasty at this point, you know.
That's really cool. So, and we'll be tasting some of that tonight. So that'll be fun. Really looking forward to that and talking to you and find out what you got going on. Okay.
Great. Thanks.
All right. Next up is a good friend of mine. I'm really pleased to have him on. As a matter of fact, I can't believe that he hasn't done one of these before. I don't know how that's happened, but Steve Beam, a co-founder and distiller over at the Limestone Branch Distillery in Lebanon, Kentucky. Hey, Steve, how you doing?
Hi, Steve. I'm doing well.
That's good. Good seeing you as always, and fun talking to you today. And again, you make some great whiskey, and it'll be fun to go through a tasting with you and our group, and to look forward to that, my friend.
Yeah, excited.
Absolutely. Next up, last but not least, Nick Nagley, founder distiller for Whiskey Acres Distilling in DeKalb, Illinois. Hey, Nick, how you doing, man?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I don't want to accept too much responsibility. I'm a co-founder. I have 2 business partners. There's no way I could take this project on my own. Okay. And also fair warning that I have 4-year-old twins that are supposed to be on their way to bed, but you may very well see them tear in here to give me one last good night. So
not a worry at all. Not a worry at all. So
and they'll stick their finger in my whiskey glass on their way out. So I've been warned.
I've been warned. Okay. Yeah, it'll be like that one viral video of the news guy, where his 2 kids come strolling in while he's doing that from the BBC, which I love. That
I've learned just take it with open arms.
Yeah. Just accept it and roll with it. Well, you know, sometimes we get embarrassed by those things, but we're all people. We all have this stuff happen, so no big deal. We're fine with whatever happens. Matter of fact, if something crazy happens, it's even more fun. So we appreciate that. All right. First up on our agenda is David DeFazio. David, tell us.
Yes, sir.
Tell us a little bit about Wyoming Whiskey. How did you guys get started in this business?
Well, we got started in 2006.
Yeah, long time ago, 15 years. Yeah.
I'm an attorney. My partners, Brad and Kate Mead, are attorneys, and I had worked in their firm for about 3 years before going on my own here in Jackson, Wyoming. And there's a long family history with the Meads. Brad is a 4th generation cattle rancher here. His grandfather was a 2-term U.S. senator and governor of the state, and his brother had just wrapped his 2nd term up as governor about 2 years ago. And so, being a cattle rancher here, there's all sorts of problems, and worries associated with it. And one of the things is a disease called brucellosis. And not to bore everybody about this, but when you are in Teton County, there's a lot of cattle and elk crossover. When that happens, my daughter as well is going to be entering the frame here in a second. So everybody gets to meet my daughter, Flynn. So this is Flynn.
Hello, Flynn.
Say hi.
Look at all these people. Look at all these people talking to your dad.
So with this brucellosis disease, it will infect cattle and cause them to abort their calves. So what the Meads did is, after selling a portion of their ranch back in about 2003, they bought a ranch in Kirby, Wyoming, which is the location of our distillery.
Okay.
And they started ranching over there as well as here. And it was a couple of years after that they decided that they wanted to diversify their investments and interests and start a bourbon distillery. So they called me, asked me, they said they had a proposal. I walked into their office. It's this creaky old building here in Jackson. My Catholic guilt just started screaming. Hold on one second, okay? Hold on one second. And my Catholic guilt is screaming. And I was like, what did I do? What did I do? And Brad says, we decided we want to make bourbon. And so I said, I laughed right in his face because it broke the tension. And I said, how do you make bourbon? And he said, that's for you to figure out. So that was the beginning of the whole thing.
Yeah. So, and it's not that long ago, really, especially for somebody who's my age. It seems like that was just yesterday, 2005, but that's a long time ago when you're talking about craft distilling and ability to find out information. It's a world of change between then and now. Now it's actually, pretty easily. People are pretty accessible. There's a lot of other people doing craft distilling, but starting out in 2000 or 15 years ago, not as easy back then.
No, there was no template back then.
Right.
We wanted to start this distillery, but where do you go? So we went to the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, and through some connections we had made through Jackson, we were introduced to Max Shapira of Heaven Hill. We sat down with him. He told us after about 45 minutes, don't do it.
Don't do it.
He said, it's going to cost 3 times as much, be 3 times as hard, and take 3 times as long as you think. And we walked out of there more emboldened than ever, because here we are thinking that we're going to be a threat to Max Shapira and Heaven Hill Distillery. And right. So we said, we're going to, we double down. And he was right, 100% right. And
like everything he said, like all the problems and cost 3 times as much as you anticipate, all that kind of stuff. He's spot on, huh?
Yep. He's a very decent guy. And
he is, yeah.
Everything about what he had said to us and everything that they do there. But we pressed on. We started working with Vendome Copper and Brass, got our still made. And then ultimately, Rob Sherman at Vendome hooked us up with Steve Nally, who had been with Maker's Mark for 33 years. And we brought him out here, and he and his wife started helping us out.
Yeah, that's not a bad guy to come help you out, right? Kentucky Bourbon Hall of Famer, great distiller, a guy who's still active today at Bardstown Bourbon Company. So that's amazing, right?
Yep. It was a tremendous start. You immediately get some legitimacy as a result of, bringing him on board. He knew what he was doing. He has the greatest Rolodex in the world. And we wanted to make a wheated bourbon. And so there was really no better person, out there to bring in and bring that level of expertise that we found with him. Yeah.
And, it doesn't end there either. I mean, to bring out the likes of Steve Nally is almost unbelievable. Like I said, it's like you said, instant credibility, but you also had Lincoln Henderson involved in your project too. So tell us about how that came about. Again, another Kentucky Bourbon Hall of Famer. I feel, and I'm almost kind of saddened by today's bourbon fan doesn't necessarily know a whole lot about Lincoln Henderson. And if they do know anything about him, they think of Angel's Envy. And, he had so much in terms of distilling, even across the spectrum, even in the agave and tequila and all kinds of stuff. I mean, he was an amazing distiller. So how did you meet him and start working with him too?
The same type of introduction. There were some folks out here who had some connections to Kentucky, and Lincoln was actually our first consultant. And so we met with him during one of the bourbon festivals, and he consulted with us. He was wrapping up his tenure with Brown-Forman at that point, but he was still the Pope when it comes to whiskey around there. And so he brought us around the facilities, both at Woodford and at the headquarters in Louisville. And man, it was amazing to be around him. It was really a privilege and an honor to work with him. And I will credit we use 2 yeasts in our fermentation, and I will credit one of the 2 yeasts to Lincoln. He brought in a few of them for Steve to sample, and Steve ended up selecting one of them. And so, his fingerprints are all over this brand. And his fingerprints are also over an experiment that we did in regards to accelerated maturation early on, because I'm one of the most impatient people you'll ever meet. He believed that there was a way to make great bourbon in a very short period of time. And he and Steve butted heads on that a little bit, but we tried an accelerated maturation experiment, which didn't work. At least it didn't have the desired effect, but it ended up producing over time 2 of the best barrels of bourbon we ever made. And so it launched a whole new program for us, this barrel strength program that is our highest end bourbon. And I credit that to him as well, because but for that experimentation, we never would have stumbled upon, what we were capable of. So he was great. I mean, I can't say enough good things about him. He stayed here in Jackson a few times. He was at the distillery during construction, and then watching he and Steve work together was a privilege. I just sat back and took notes and listened.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. What are you going to say to add to any conversation they've got going on? I mean,
nothing.
Two of the great minds. Yeah. Yeah. So, and was Lincoln talking about, finishing bourbon and things like that back to you? Because obviously that becomes a huge contribution to the world of bourbon, and think about when he launches Angel's Envy and the port cask finish and how big that is in basically across the spectrum now with distilleries. Was he talking about that with you guys too?
He had brought it up, but we were in our infancy, so we weren't there yet.
Yeah.
With us, I think the only out of the box thinking that, he was really bringing was this accelerated maturation idea that he had, and just the principles, the foundation of bourbon making. So we didn't get to the finishing, unfortunately. I wish Lincoln were still around today, because, we would most likely still be working him in some capacity, but that was not really, we didn't dive into that at the time.
Yeah. So he, like I said, was just a consultant. He goes back and he, starts Angel's Envy with his son, Wes. And how long does Steve Nally stay with you?
Steve was with us for about 8 years.
Yeah, that's a long time. Yeah.
Yep. He got us going and really became a fixture in Thermopolis, which is the nearest town. And he still has a home there. They became very active in the community. They were royalty. I mean, you don't have somebody like Steve Nally, move into a little town that often. And so they're still very respected. They still spend a lot of time out there over the course of the year. I think he's coming back here soon. And I'm not allowed to talk too much about what's coming up, but we will be working with Steve in a limited capacity on something for next year.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. So once you get the distillery going and all of that, you're making some whiskey, tastes great, which is not that surprising, I guess, based on the people that you have helping you. But when did you get that moment where you're like, man, we're really onto something here? This is kind of what we envisioned. And when did you get that aha moment that this is for real?
Much later than you would think.
Okay.
Anybody that knows anything about Wyoming whiskey knows that we blew it out of the gate.
Mm-hmm.
We released stuff that was too young, and we were drinking the Kool-Aid in the truest sense. When you're drinking it right off the still and know what the White Dog tastes like, and then what it tastes like after a year or 2 years, 3 years, you say, wow, we got this is pretty good, but it's pretty good compared to the White Dog. And we unfortunately didn't have people giving us the truth about what they thought. And so I think there was just so much excitement in Wyoming to get a finished product out on the market that has the name Wyoming on the bottle, that we rushed to the market. And I think that's a story that's all too common when it comes to craft distillers. And we learned a really valuable lesson, and for us, I don't think our product really got up on plane until it hit 5 years of age.
Mm-hmm.
And, we don't sell anything less than 5 years of age now. Our oldest product will be released next year. Well, our oldest to date is just under 9 years old, and that's Outrider. That's a story in itself. But I would say the aha moment came when we got to about batch 30, 35, somewhere in there of our bourbon. And Nancy Fraley, who I'm sure you're familiar with.
Sure. Nancy the Nose. Yeah.
Nancy the Nose. She backfilled for Steve. As soon as Steve left, Nancy came on and became our master blender and noser and all around awesome human being, superhero, really. And, when she starts telling us, okay, you now have a fine sipping bourbon. That was the moment where smiles all around the distillery. It's like, we've reached that point.
Right.
And it felt so great, after suffering. I like to say we stepped on a bunch of rakes in the beginning, right? And releasing a product too young was probably the worst one to step on. But this brought us out of that. And then we started releasing into other markets, and none of those folks had been burned by the younger batches that we had released here in Wyoming. And feedback started really coming in. Paul Packelt gave us a really good rating. And we started feeling really good about ourselves at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. And you guys have done an amazing job of getting your product out there for being, independent. It's not like you got Campari behind you or DeFazio or somebody big backing you. Because as just a bourbon fan, when I'm traveling around vacation or, doing things in the bourbon industry, I like to go to liquor stores, and it amazes me how many times I see your product sitting on the shelf. So how does that all come about? How do you get out to so many places?
Well, I'll be right with you. 1 second. Okay. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Just give me a couple more minutes, okay? One of the first things first is I think we were doing a decent job of hitting a few markets.
Right.
We didn't have the resources that we needed in order to, my daughter's making faces at me now, in order to really hit a lot of places. And I think that, we were very successful in Colorado. We started doing some really good work in Southern California. But as any small distiller will tell you, distribution and getting the attention of the distributor is next to impossible. You just don't have the resources to make that happen. So almost 3 years ago now, we entered into a partnership with Edrington. And when you have Edrington in your corner, doors start opening up for you. When Macallan is in the portfolio, suddenly people pay attention to you.
Right.
Okay. Hold on 1 second.
Sure. Why don't we take a second here to pour the small batch from Wyoming? We're going to be moving on to the tasting of that in just a second here. So tell us a little bit about this whiskey. What should we anticipate here?
Well, so our flagship product is what you have in front of you. Mm-hmm. This is a 45 barrel batch. In the early days, we were doing it at 15 barrels, and we were all about handmade. Everything has to be so handmade and handcrafted and all that stuff, which I think are words that have been so overused in the industry. But we realized that if you're going to get a consistent product, you needed to be batching a reasonable amount of barrels so that from batch to batch to batch, you're going to have a consistency. When you look on the back of our bottle, you'll always see a batch number. We used to have a born on date, because we thought that was cool. It really has no relevance to anything. So the batch number is what lets you know a little bit more about it. For me, when I go around the country and I look on a shelf and I see the number, it tells me how, what the velocity is on the shelf and, how current they are. But when we make this product, we will build it as a pyramid. And this level of sophistication, I have to give 100% credit to Nancy Fraley, because when Nancy comes in, we were rotating our barrels in the early days, just like makers. Mm-hmm. And she came in and said, stop. She goes, that limits you tremendously, because then you aren't able to find the honey spots in the warehouse.
Right.
You aren't able to develop new product lines because everything becomes, I dare say, homogenous. And so we stopped doing that. And she batches our small batch so that we have the consistency by we have 3 flavor profiles that are coming out of our warehouses. And, it's basically the lower levels, the mid to high, and then the high levels. And we'll take maybe 30 to 35 barrels from our A flavor profile in the bottom part of the warehouse, which is our base flavor profile of caramel, orange, vanilla. Just that, if there's one thing that defines us, it's that COV profile, we call it. Mm-hmm. And then with the middle of the warehouse, as you know, you're starting to get warmer. You're starting to get some rich flavors coming out of that. Your fruits, nuts, things like that. And then at the top of the warehouse, you get your spice, your allspice, your cinnamons, and things like that. So it builds. The A forms the foundation. The B is the middle part of the pyramid towards the top. And then a few barrels will form the very tip of it and give you maybe the cinnamon that you might be tasting as you sample this. Okay. And as I said, everything in here is at least 5 years old. I would say our product now is starting to push more into the 5.5 to 6 year range. And some of our specialty products are moving up even higher than that. It's considerably in some cases. So I like to think that this is a light to medium bodied bourbon. And this was all by design to some extent. When Brad and I first started this, we thought we knew something about bourbon. We didn't know squat, compared to, what everyone else in the industry knew. And once we started learning, we started refining it more and more. But we always did like Maker's Mark, and we always liked the wheated flavor and profile. And so we stuck to that. 68% corn, 20% winter wheat, 12% malted barley. All of our grain is grown about 90 miles from our distillery, excuse me, by Brent and Sherry Regath. They're great farmers. Everything's non-GMO, which was a decision we made early on, not knowing how important that decision would be to some consumers.
Right.
It's more expensive to grow non-GMO corn, but at the end of the day, we think it's worth it. So, and we never went down the organic rat hole because it's so difficult to really have a truly organic farm. And where we are on an irrigation district, it would have been literally impossible to do that. So non-GMO as far as we go.
Okay. You've got some great nosing notes coming in here. I don't know if you can see those, and we'll talk tasting notes in just a second, but pralines and cherries, red apple, pear, cider, light oak, peaches, dark cherries, vanilla, red apple, vanilla, pineapple even out there, sweet tea, apple, orange, creamsicle. What I like about all these is it tells us exactly what we're looking for in a bourbon. It's that layering of flavors, and you can see there's a lot of different things going on there, which is just fantastic. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about on taste. If you haven't tasted already, folks, what do we got here? Tim Swiat's providing some fat guy tasting notes. Nice. Honey, pecan, a little cinnamon, delicious. Yeah, this is very good.
It's at 88 proof, as you may, I don't know if I mentioned that. The reason for that, if you want to hear a funny story, is
sure.
I had asked Steve early on, what proof do you think we're going to come in here? And he said, I'd like to be somewhere in the 85 to 90 proof range. And I said, how about 88? Because I graduated high school in 88. And he said, yeah, that sounds great. And so we kind of just went with that. And then as I got into the TTB requirements of labeling and whatnot, realizing that ABV is the most important thing to put on the label, the only thing that's truly required.
Right.
I saw there was 44 ABV. Well, Wyoming's the 44th state to be admitted to the union.
Oh,
and
wow.
So that connection,
serendipity.
Saying, okay, how can we really connect the bottle to the state as much as possible? So 44% ABV. When you look at the bottom of the bottle, you'll see that there's a double T. There's a double T on the bottom. That's the Mead Ranch cattle brand. We embossed the bottle so that it looked like it had some heritage to it because we had none. And so we did our best to tie it into the state and the mead heritage more than anything. So just a little bit of background there for you.
Very cool. Some of your tasting notes include sweet tea, honey, pecan, leather, a lot of flavor, depth, honeysuckle, light baking spices, hint of cinnamon, smooth. And again, 88 proof this has a really nice finish to it. It's a weeder, but it's a little spicy, it's nice. So really, really pleasant experience. Great whiskey, off to an excellent start. David, appreciate you coming on today. If you've got time, I know you got you're watching your daughter there. If you got time to stick around with us and answer some questions at the end.
Yeah, that's my plan. I'll mute myself here and
okay, sounds good
with her. And thank you for the time. It's an honor to be with you guys and to the other distillers on here. I looked up, I know a couple of you, and I looked all of you up, and I have tremendous respect for what you guys are doing. And to that Yellowstone product, I'll say that's my backyard. So just be careful. I'll leave you with that.
Very nice. Very nice. For our distillers, hopefully you got samples too. We do send out samples to our distillers. We never ask you questions about anybody else's product, but we like you to be able to enjoy them as you're participating here. All right, Alex Clark. Alex, how you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks, Steve.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your history. How did you get into this business?
Well, firstly, let me say thank you for inviting me and allowing me to be in such esteemed company. It's an absolute honor to be chatting with these gentlemen today. And I'm going to learn a lot more from listening to these guys than you will from listening to me, but that's cool. The backstory for me is that I have been in the food and beverage industry for a long time as a bartender. When I first moved to New York with a guy called Sasha Petrasky, who opened a bar called Milk and Honey on the Lower East Side of New York City, which is a very famous cocktail bar, pretty much ground zero for the cocktail renaissance in America and the world after that. So I got to learn at his hand, under his tutelage, the classic American cocktails, Manhattans, Old Fashions, Sazeracs, Bucarets, like all these wonderful concoctions, which all demanded rye whiskey as a base. And at the time, you could get 2 rye whiskeys in New York. You could get Old Overholt, you could get Rittenhouse. If you begged your rep, you could get Rittenhouse Bonded, which is like the holy grail. That was it. There was no other rye whiskey to be had. And it didn't seem to make sense to me. You've got these amazing cocktails, but only 2 ryes. And so I started looking into the history of rye, history of distilling in America, and realized that the Prohibition had killed all the distilleries in the Northeast in New York, where I had moved to from the UK. And that didn't seem right.
I thought you were a Brooklyn native. That's what I would have guessed.
Yeah, from Queens. That's what the accent is. That's what's throwing everyone off. So I realized then, I think that's when the light bulb came on, like, we should probably do something about this. And then fast forward a couple of years, a friend of mine wanted to open a distillery. And he said, do you want to come on board and help me do it and be the director of sales? You know your spirits. And at the time, it was a super young industry, the craft spirits industry. This is back in 2011. And we ended up opening the Widow Jane Distillery in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And launched that and developed the brand and developed some other products around it. And did some distillation too. And I think, and then put a rye out on the back of the Widow Jane bourbon, which of course was a source product. And then kind of felt that I wanted to be a bit more creative with it and get into a more creative space. So I left that company and decided to focus on New York rye whiskey. And that's how Fort Hamilton was born back in 2015-ish. Took me about 2016 to get my first whiskey in the barrel. And we've been kind of rolling ever since. Stylistically, I kind of knew what I was going for, because when I had gone sourcing whiskey for Widow Jane, we'd met Drew Colesveen down at Kentucky Bourbon Distillers. And I was rolling with Dave Pickerel at the time, who had helped us kind of get things kick-started down at Widow Jane. And so he took us down and we were rapping with Drew, and he pulls out this bottle of rye from 1909. And I thought, well, this is interesting. What is this? And it was, of course, it was a Monongahela style rye whiskey. So that means, no corn in the mash bill, just rye and malted barley. And man, that thing knocked me off my chair. I was not in a bad way. I mean, just flavor wise, it was an absolute bomb. And I thought, wow, this is something. And so that's kind of how the Fort Hamilton story kind of got born. And then we've been working at it since 2016 and building up very slowly a supply chain of whiskey, which is imperative in this business, and did not quit the day job. Had a very still have a very understanding wife and family. Kids are at home, and I'm just here with a glass of whiskey, which is very refreshing, gotta say. That's nice. So we've been rolling into market since about 2018 with our single barrel rye, which is what we all have. I think that's what we're sampling today, right?
That is correct. Yeah, we'll be having that. New York has a rye designation, the Empire Rye. What are the rules to be an Empire Rye?
It's got to be made at one distillery, distilled in one distillery. It's got to be at least 75% New York grain has to be barreled at 115 proof or less, and it has to be at least 2 years old.
Yeah. Are you going to be dabbling in any of that? You're going to do any Empire Ryes?
Well, I have barreled a bunch of stuff at 115.
Right.
What we're tasting today was barreled at 120. Nobody told me about that rule that was coming down the pipeline. So, and frankly, is my 4-year-old 120 proof rye going to be better than a 2-year-old 115 proof? Probably. So yeah, so we haven't put any to market yet, but in theory, we have the ability to flex and do that in the future. I'm on the fence about whether I'm going to join that party or not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What about bourbon too? Is that going to be something that we've talked a lot about rye? Are you going to be making?
Yeah.
Have you already laid down some bourbon?
Yeah, I have. I don't think you're in the whiskey conversation in America unless you're in the bourbon conversation to an extent. You know, it's just such a much larger market. I think almost 23 times the size of the rye market. And so much as I'm extraordinarily romantic about the notion of New York rye, I'm also realistic about the business. And the fact of the matter is, if you're not in the bourbon game, you're not in the game. So we did bring out a double barrel bourbon, which came out just before Christmas last year.
Okay.
Almost as a reaction to COVID in a way, which really slowed my plans down for the distillery and the tasting room, which was supposed to open in Brooklyn. And as you know, we got knocked for 6 and got rocked real hard last year. And a lot of our on-premise restaurants and bars shut down. Coming from a food and beverage background, I lost my job as well and just had to go full time with the business at that point, which was supposed to happen. It was just supposed to happen in a more strategic fashion. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it was a bit. My hand was forced a bit, but I mean, it was going to happen last year anyway. It was just a weird way for it to go down. Yeah. So I was intending for the tasting room to get open, for the bourbon to roll out accordingly. And ultimately, I've been laying bourbon down for the last 3 years or so. As you may be aware, bourbon corn, has an immaturity to it, which is more present at a younger age than rye. So it's rye's a bit more pleasant to drink young than bourbon.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so we haven't released a single barrel format of our bourbon yet. But we are doing a little double barrel blend of some bourbon that we sourced and bourbon that we've made ourselves in upstate New York. And we have put that together for our double barrel bourbon. We do have single barrel bourbon barrels aging now up to 3 years old. And we're excited to see those come out probably sometime around summertime next year.
Okay. Last question before we start tasting your whiskey. COVID stuff aside, not anything to do with that. Inherently, what are some of the issues you think of having a distillery in Brooklyn? I mean, it seems to be a little bit more challenging than some of the other areas of the country. So, what are some of the issues that you think you face that maybe some others don't have to deal with?
Rent is a little pricey over here.
Right.
But the FDNY, they're extremely serious about you not setting fire to somebody else's building or your own, or the guy upstairs or the guy downstairs. I think the density of population is a factor that affects all of us distillers in Brooklyn and New York City in a great way, which is difficult. It's difficult to handle that. There's new fire codes getting passed around now at City Council with the FDNY. It's like there are hoops that we have to jump through that I just aren't quite the same as other hoops out there.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's the price, obviously. There's the fact that we're not on a farm, and distilling is kind of like farm work in many ways. You're talking about getting grain from a farm. You're talking about distilling it and needing lots of height, lots of space, lots of storage capacity, and then what do you do with your stillage? What do you do with your spent grains? Ideally you feed them to the animals, right? Which is again, it's farm work. So as I sort of saw the situation when I was at Widow Jane and looked around at some of the other distillers here and figured out that what I was going to do and how I was going to build my supply chain was actually use other people's distilleries just outside the city, which is closer to the grain, and start building my supply of whiskey there. So that's what I did. We started distilling in a couple of distilleries, one in Warwick and now one in Stanfordville, New York. And we've laid down heavy amounts of rye and slightly less heavy amounts of bourbon, pretty much, closer to the grain, in a more sustainable way, developing relationships with farmers. And I think that's the right way to approach the business. And as we now backing into our distillery in Brooklyn, we have this supply chain already at our fingertips, and that was important. I think if you open a distillery in Brooklyn and you say we're going to start making whiskey, right, you're going to end up having to sell whiskey that's too young, and I think that's a problem that was already mentioned, and I think that being forced financially into those decisions is what causes people a lot of headaches. And if you do that early, you only really get one bite of the cherry, especially these days. There's so much competition out there. Somebody tastes your whiskey and they're like, it's not so good, I'm not interested. Or worse, it's like, it's horrible, I'll never taste this ever again in my life. And then you've got yourself some serious problems. So I've been very fiercely defending our inventory and trying not to release too much too soon to market or anything that wasn't ready. And if you're paying full rent in Brooklyn for a big distillery and lots of space, then you're going to encounter that problem. There's really no two ways about it, unless you have extraordinarily deep pockets, which I don't.
Not happening. Yeah. Well, if I could have our participants here put in some tasting notes. We've got some coming in already. Grassy, earthy, fresh field after a rainstorm, fresh breeze before a rainstorm. So as we get the before and the after there, lemon sugar cookies. So pear, baking spices, caramel, hint of mild chocolate. So keep those coming in. And if you don't mind, Alex, just tell us a little bit about what we can anticipate with the whiskey that we'll be tasting in just a second, this 90 proof rye.
Sure. So the deal here is this is a single barrel format, and we're all tasting the same barrel. It's made from 90% New York State rye grain, winter rye in this case, and 10% malted barley. There is no corn in this mash bill, and that could be potentially problematic if so I guess my point is, I'm really leaning into trying to make rye big again, right? Like, I'm trying to celebrate rye here. It's the original whiskey of America. It was all coming out the Northeast, and Prohibition kind of destroyed our distilleries up here. So, why not take it back to how things were done before Prohibition? That was kind of the mission. If we were going to have to put our finger on it, that would be it. So I wanted to make a rye that was approachable to a bourbon drinker. Because I think there's a lot of people out there that when they say, hey, do you want to taste my rye? They're like, oh, I don't really like rye. But chances are they haven't tasted a particularly good one. And they certainly haven't tasted one in this style, perhaps. So to remove all the corn from the rye, it kind of gives us an advantage in as much as we don't have the immaturity of the corn blowing in and hitting our taste receptors. But especially in the Northeast where winters are colder and you don't get as much aging on the barrel in the same amount of time as you do down south where it's warmer. Removing the corn actually could be an advantage. However, you might end up with a big spice bomb without any. So how do you balance that out? So ultimately, I started playing around with different barrel sizes. I certainly didn't want to get down to 10 gallon, 12 gallon, 15 gallon sizes. And I was chatting with Dave Pickerel back in the day, and we decided that maybe a 25 gallon barrel from Kelvin Cooperage would be a really good starting place. So that's what I did. That's actually not what we're tasting today. We've pretty much gone through all those. I moved up to 30 gallon barrels from Barrel Mill, Minnesota, a few years back. So what we're tasting today is about 4 years old in a Char 3 barrel from Barrel Mill in Minnesota. 90% New York rye grain, 10% malted barley. It's non-chill filtered. And where we are in Industry City in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, I'm staring right now at a giant steam generator that's in the courtyard, which generates millions of BTUs of heat during the winter, which gets pumped through steam pipes in all the buildings that we're in. So there's radiators all the way down those walls and in the barrel storage area on the other side, which heats our barrels during the winter as well. So we end up getting a good amount of a higher average temperature in our barrels over the course of a year than most New York whiskeys do. And
Nice.
that gives us a nice advantage. The 30-gallon size, I think after 4 years, I have some that are almost up to 5 years now as well. They're still showing well. They're certainly nowhere near over oak. They still have a little way to go, I think. So for me, what I love about these barrels is the Char 3 gives us more caramel, vanilla.
That's what I'm getting here. It's like a caramel bomb, really. I mean, it's really, really good. Kind of like a little brown, kind of like the burnt brown sugar taste, the good way. Definitely spicy, nice finish too on the taste. What are you guys getting on the taste? Nate's saying a lot sweeter than he expected. I agree. Chocolate, strong baking spices, great rye taste, caramel throughout. Yeah. What else do we got coming in here? Got Barry and Barry's neighbor. I like when he puts in the notes, my neighbor says. What else? Baking spice and cinnamon. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those classic oak notes. So really trying to kind of celebrate the caramel in here as much as possible. And those barrels really give us that. I think that's attractive to a bourbon drinker in many ways. And so certainly non-chill filtration gives us a nice amount of richness and I think a longer finish than applying chill filtration to it. And it's one less step for us in a way. It's easier to do it that way for us. But ultimately, I've tasted it both ways and tried it both ways. And frankly, non-chill filtration gives, in my opinion, a much more solid product.
Well, this product is great. We appreciate you sharing it with us. Got some other notes coming in: baked caramel buns, brown sugar and almonds, spiced cinnamon, baking spices, honey caramel, flavor not overpowering, but it lingers on for a long time. Well developed, sweet pumpkin spice, bit buttery, baking spice, nice mouthfeel. So all good stuff there. Really appreciate you introducing this to us tonight. Really good stuff, Alex.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
We'll have you stick around to the end too if you got time.
I will be here, sir.
All right, we'll have a Q&A at the end and we'll bring you back for that.
Great. Cheers.
Cheers. All right, our next guest, I think a lot of people know this individual. We've done several events with this gentleman. I always like talking to him, though. He's got such a great history and truly one of the best people in the bourbon business, which is a very nice business, by the way. Steve is a standout in that. So hello, Steve Beam. How you doing?
All right. Doing great, Steve. Glad.
Absolutely. Glad to see you here. And I just saw you last weekend. We were at the Bourbon Festival and together. And Lisa Wicker had me take the selfie. I don't know why. I don't do that, but I did. And I actually liked the picture. It was a good one. It was me, you, Royce, and Lisa. And it worked out really good. It was a nice photo. So I don't know, maybe I have a new thing. Maybe I'll be an Instagram model soon. She's started me a whole new career.
Yeah. Well, I took my first selfie about 2 weeks ago. So I said my arms are too short.
You had a good one though, because there was a bear involved. So
yes, there was a bear involved.
I saw that one. Yeah, that was good. That was good. Where are you at now? Are you traveling or are you at home?
I am in Florida right now.
Okay, nice.
I am heading to Anchorage tomorrow morning.
Oh, okay. Oh, so, very nice. Very nice.
Got market visit up there, and a barrel release on Saturday. So
okay. I'll have to
come out and see me.
We have a couple of our fans that are on a lot of these events. A lot of, unfortunately, they sign up and they don't get to participate live. We do record these, we put them out on YouTube, but they're like 5 hours behind. So most of the time they're at work when we're doing this. So they buy the kits and then follow along and then watch it. So I'll make sure that they know that you're going to be in Anchorage, and maybe they'll come out to your event. That'd be cool.
Yeah. We have a dinner tomorrow night and then a barrel release on Saturday. So.
On Saturday. Okay. Very nice.
And then a red eye back to Tampa. So.
That doesn't sound like the fun part of the trip. No.
No.
No. I'm heading that way next year. My nephew, my younger nephew, graduates high school, so that's the two of two. So my sister lives up there, and yeah, I'll be heading that way too. So first time in a while. So Steve, we've heard your story, but it's always good. We get new bourbon fans, different people. You weren't on a path to own a distillery. You had a whole career before this, and then you partnered with your brother on a business. But you had this family history that just kept beckoning to you and kept calling to you, and you knew probably at some point you were gonna do this thing, right?
Right. Well, really from early age, like high school,
Yeah.
I had really wanted to be in the distillery business, but it just was not feasible on budget, on most people's budget at that time, because when I first looked into it after college, you still had to have a gauger on site. Everything was geared, toward massive distilleries.
Right.
And, so I just had to shelve it. But I always had it in the back of my head. And then really the seed was replanted again when I went to my cousins who have that big distillery down the road, the 200th anniversary.
Ah, yes.
So, it was a great event. Booker was there. Everybody named Jim Beam got to split $100,000.
Really? Is that right?
Showed up.
So wait a minute. Did your brother get a piece of that pie then?
My dad, my brother.
Oh,
and my
nice.
nephew. Oh, and I
Did they
was just
share
along.
with you? Did they
I
share
was
with
just
you?
no. I was just along for the ride. But I started talking to this gentleman. He was actually worked with the control state in New Hampshire. He was from the administrator, and so he was in, and we were talking, and I said, well, I have this family recipe, and I'd love to get it back up, and just a bucket of this and a bucket of that, and he said, you really and this was, gosh, I don't even know when that was, but anyway, he kind of kindled that flame that I had, and so but it's still just the time was not right, and my father was always dead set against being in the distillery business.
Really?
He had seen some really rough times, and had seen a lot of people go through a lot of difficulties, in the 1940s, and then in the 60s, and when everything was doing great, but then you started getting a lot of consolidation and things. So anyway, so he was always against it up until we actually took the plunge, and then then he was behind it. But
right. So and again, we know the big company down the road just celebrated 225 last year. So we're talking 26 years ago. You were kind of got the spark and be like, I really want to do this
again. Yes.
Yeah. Ultimately, as a high school,
right.
So then you looked at it, and just time wasn't right, and I would assume it would have been incredibly difficult again at that time. But when do you get your distillery going, Steve?
Well, I again started looking back when the internet was in its infancy,
right?
Because you'd have to dial up and look and do searches, and they were crazy.
Yeah.
I'm sure you remember that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And all of a sudden I started getting a few hits, and Dry Fly out in Washington popped up. So and then Fritz Maytag in San Francisco. He came up, so I was like, okay, well, this is something. And then ADI popped up, and Bill Owens, and he's
Bill Owens,
like the godfather of the first round of craft distillers. Honestly, I mean, all of them.
Definitely a legend. Yes, that's. I was just talking with someone else about that, and they're like, he was like, he needs to go in the Bourbon Hall of Fame. I'm like, well, it's like the Kentucky Bourbon Hall of Fame. He belongs there. He is all the people that he has helped along the way. But yes, that's why I think they need to rework that a little bit. So somebody like Bill Owens should be in there for sure.
He was an inspiration for, that whole, first few hundred or more, because we were going to ADI there.
Yeah.
The Craft Spirits Association. Yeah. That came out of ADI, but, he did, he was the Pied Piper.
Yeah. Just
very
an event
passionate.
to get people together. They were doing this thing from across the country. It had to be huge in those early days to
Right,
meet people.
absolutely.
And yeah, I would think that's the most important thing that came out of all that.
Yeah, it was just so exciting to talk. People like Lincoln Henderson was there. At the meeting.
Right.
Of Chip Tate and just different people that were like icons of the business back then.
Mhm.
Anyway, it was that inspired me more, and I actually they had a convention in Louisville in 2008, I guess.
Okay.
And I went to that, and I was just like, that was it. I was sold, and I was in the restaurant business at that time. That was April. I came back May or so. Told my brother, if we're gonna do this, it's now or never. And by October, I had sold the restaurant and gone full head steam into the, opening up a distillery, which I had no idea what I was doing.
Right.
And but I had a lot of good friends who knew what to do. So I had a lot of help along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you do a good job of how do you pay that back? How do you pay it forward? And, it's not helping the people that helped you. You certainly thank them and all that, but it's helping others. And I know you do a great job of that. Literally, I think anybody who's starting a distillery could reach out to you and you would help them,
Right.
And
I try,
Yeah, it's such a great business, right? I mean,
right. It is, and of course, everybody, all the Kentucky distillers get along really well. And, so everyone, just has that mentality of helping each other out when necessary. So,
yeah.
and there's a lot of history there.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the Yellowstone Select that we're going to be sampling tonight.
So, Yellowstone, so we started the distillery 2010, really got going in 11. And, the first few years we were doing a little bit of bourbon, doing a lot of moonshine to keep the doors open. Actually, moonshine was kind of having a moment at that time. And so we kind of rode that, but always made bourbon, a little bit. And then, but one of the things that I had always wanted to do was to bring back one of the old brands that was my family was associated with. And Yellowstone was actually on both sides of the family. My mother and father's side, the dance and the beans were together in that. So Yellowstone came out of that. And so 2015, we partnered with Luxco, who had owned the brand and brought it back to life. In the deal that we did, that Limestone became responsible, and thus I responsible for the Yellowstone. And we reformulated it to what we'll taste tonight, sort of. Because tonight is when we first reformulated, it was all sourced, 4 and 7 year old.
Mm-hmm.
It's a blend of sourced and ours,
Yeah.
And so this is 4 and 7 year old. I chose 4 because the corn notes coming through, the grain notes come through at that age, really helps it stand up nicely in a cocktail. And the 7, is added in to give it some body and help with the finish and make it a nice sipping whiskey as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, we use white corn. Of course, the source is yellow corn, and our recipe is 75% corn, 13% rye, and 12% malt, which is what my grandfather had used. And of course, we used the yeast that we got from the yeast jug that Minor Case had.
Yeah.
So that's a whole story. I mean, I could go on forever about that. Dr. Pat over at Wilderness Trail, Dr. Yeast.
Right.
was able to, to revive that yeast strain for us, which was really, it's just a magical thing. And we're coming up on our Yellowstone is coming up on our 150th anniversary next year.
Wow.
So it's really,
that's going to be a big party, I assume. That's gotta be. Yeah.
It's an exciting time to be associated with the brand. It's an exciting time to have the brand have a rebirth and a renaissance, and come back and be so well received that it is right now.
Yeah. Well, let's start sharing some of those nosing notes, folks, that we can share with Steve what we're getting here. I mean, it's really good on the nose. I mean, you get the corn, as you say, you get that Granny Smith apple, caramel, peanuts, brown sugar, dried orange. That's what I'm getting, the dried orange, cardamom. Yeah.
Yeah, that orange note really, that comes up a lot, and that really helps it in an old fashioned. It makes a old fashioned because of those citrus notes.
Yeah, slight nuttiness. Yeah, that's good. I'll tell you, there's only two bourbons that I collect. I'm not a collector, but I do collect the Yellowstones and then the Little Book. Those are the two series that I have to have. The rest of them, they're just too hard to get. But I like your product because it's great and you can find it. You got to search a little bit. Matter of fact, I don't even have one from this year yet. Though I'm going to be by the Distillery. Is it at the Distillery now?
It comes and goes.
Okay, I'll check because I'm going to be by that way.
Yeah.
I'll pop in.
Well, let me know and I might be able to find you a bottle.
Okay. I will take you up on that. Because I do not have one yet. So that'll be.
But it was tough. But it's tough to get them. They like to send them out to all the distributors. So
yeah.
And we have to fight at the distillery to get them as well.
Yep. All right. Let's give it a taste here. Oh yeah.
We can talk a little bit about the proof, so like I said, I chose the 4 and the 7-year-old, the corn and the grain coming through it, the 4 to help it stand up nice in a cocktail. But the 93 was the proof that really worked for this particular blend. And when we put it out there originally, it came back, the feedback from the sales staff was, it needed to be 100 proof because everybody wanted 100 proof. This was back, 2015. Everybody wanted 100 proof whiskey, and it needed to be 100 proof. So, I said, okay, well, I'll readdress it. So I went back again and tasted through everything from 90 to a little bit over 100. And really 93 is where it worked for me. So you can open the bottle, pour it into the glass, and it works neat. And that's that's why I drink my whiskey, and it just worked really well for that.
It works beautifully. Great taste here. Again, same thing. It sticks with you, kind of in the center of your palate. I'm still getting, after I drink it, I'm still getting some spice tingly. So yeah, really, really good stuff. Yeah, that's what Tim's saying too. Mid palate. That's where I'm getting it. So yeah.
And of course, this Yellowstone Select will always, that's our flagship, and that will always be will be a blend of ours and source for quite some time, because this is available in all 50 states and over a dozen countries. And when we were making just a few barrels a day, or start out a barrel a day, then a few barrels a day, we just didn't have a lot of stock to do that. And now, we have the capacity just through our last renovation and addition of still, we have the capacity to do 10 barrels a day. And currently we're doing about 7.
Yeah. Yeah. Very nice. So still got so plenty of room for growth there. So that's very cool. Well, very enjoyable, Steve. Really like what you're doing. Great whiskey. And please stick around, and we'll have a little Q&A in just a little bit here. Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. All right. Nick from Whiskey Acres. How you doing, buddy?
Good, buddy.
That's good.
I'm doing great. Thanks.
Good to hear. So tell us a little bit about how you got in this business.
8 years later, I'm still trying to figure that out. But
what was your background before you got into this business? What did you do?
So I'm a proud 5th generation farm boy. So
Okay.
my family has been doing row crop and cattle farming since the 1860s. My dad still actively farms and farms enough that he needs help, but doesn't need a partner or can't afford the salary that I would like to demand. I went to college and I went to college at the University of Illinois and studied agricultural communications and advertising. I spent several years working in corporate communications with major agribusiness clients. I left that side of the business and started working as a district sales manager for a seed company where I was managing a territory that went from essentially Chicago to about 50 miles west to the east of Iowa. And here, hold on. Everly wants to say hi before she goes to bed.
Hello.
Hold on 1 second.
Hello. Look at all these people here to hear your dad talk. How about that? It's crazy, right?
Anyone
Look at all them
say?
waving to you.
Say something. Well,
Just say, you guys have a wonderful day.
You guys have a wonderful day.
You go to bed.
It's time for me to go to bed.
All right. Thank you
right.
for saying hello.
Love you. Okay.
Daddy.
Yeah. Yep. Love you. Okay.
Did you hear
Yep,
said
I will.
bye to Felicity Girl?
Deal. Bye. All right.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. No problem. That's fun.
Okay. Here, go to bed.
Those times go by quick too, by the way. So next thing you know, they're
All
out of
right.
school and on their own. So enjoy them. Yeah.
So I took over a sales territory that landed me in DeKalb, Illinois. And DeKalb, Illinois is where I met my 2 business partners, Jim and Jamie Walter, where they have their 5th generation family farm as well. And they've been on that site since the 1930s and can trace their roots back to Portsmouth, Ohio, prior to that. And Jim and Jamie are also their father and son team, also 4th and 5th generation farmers, and just incredibly entrepreneurial and always looking for things to do to diversify the farm. In fact, Jim, I think he's actively participating in his 52nd harvest.
Wow.
Literally as we speak. I'm not sure who's working harder, me doing this or him in the field, but we're both having fun right now. But Jim has always been frustrated by the fact that his farm is 60 miles west of Chicago, and every load of grain that they've ever produced goes west away from the city, the 3rd largest metro center in the country. And has always looked for ways to diversify the farm and get a little bit, higher on the food chain, so to speak. And his son, Jamie, also, very entrepreneurial and spent several years as sort of a business / hobby working in the wine business, doing some custom blending and making his own cab out of Napa Valley. And during the crash of 2008, one of his batches got the company that did his packaging and shipping essentially went bankrupt. And so his wine got caught in some sort of interstate limbo and spent several months before he could get it back. And he basically said, I never want to participate in something that I have so little control over, and looked very hard into seeing if he could create that Napa experience in DeKalb, Illinois, and quickly realized that we grow corn and that's what we're best at. And any type of grapes that we want to grow here are not adequate for what he wanted to produce. I'm sorry, here, we got number 2 here. Say hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Can I have my kiss? All right, I'll come and give you a hug in your bed, okay? And so Jamie tells a story that he had this epiphany of he was reading a magazine about bourbon, looking out his back door and sees the corn and says, why am I looking into grapes when I should be looking into corn to make whiskey? And so it was at that time I was working with those guys in the seed business. That's enough. And they knew that I had some, entrepreneurial aspirations. They knew my sales background. They knew my farming background and my sales and marketing background here.
And so they had been essentially had the seed business or the whiskey business on the back burner, and were looking for sort of the extra piece of the puzzle to really help execute this. So at the same time, I had a job offer from a competitive seed company that was going to make me a kind of a big fish in a small pond, and I had shared that information with them, and they called me back the next day after we had this conversation and said, Nick, before you take this job, we want to talk to you about something to do on the farm. So make a long story short, I went from telling my wife about this giant signing bonus and wonderful, salary increase to talking about cashing out a 401k and making sure she couldn't quit her job to start this distillery. And so that was in 2012. We spent the better part of a year putting together, not COVID, we've been tested. We spent the better part of a year putting a business plan together, and a name that I heard earlier today. We worked with Dave Pickerell. Don't open those, and he helped us to ground truth our business plan, to really help us. I heard Vendome was mentioned earlier today as well, to help us work with them to make sure that we were getting the equipment to match our production and our output, and really to teach us the ABCs of distilling. Our goal was not to make a maker's mark, but as much as to make something that was approachable, sort of in that same vein. Mm-hmm. So in that first year, we put our business plan together, and then we put a barrel plan together. And I think I heard Steve mentioned that rushed a product to market. I'm not sure that we have maybe quite the regrets that he did, but what I am very glad of is we never have sourced a drop of whiskey in our distillation career. And with the caveat of a little bit of barley, we've never sourced any grain as well. So the farm itself is about 2,000 acres. We only need about 5 to 7% of what we grow to actually operate the distillery. So we truly get to select the best of the best, or the cream of the crop, for ourselves. And because of the farm and because of the seed business, annually, we are planting between 16 and 24 different varietals of corn. And when we're looking at those varietals of corn with our farmer hat on, what we're looking at is very specifically, will it yield? The way we make a living on the farm is bushels per acre times dollars per bushel. And so when you're making your seed decisions, it's you're choosing something that will have the most output. Take your farmer hat off and look at your distiller's hat. We can be a little bit, we're very different in what we're looking for. So we're looking for grain quality. We're looking for starch content and test weight. We're looking for disease resistance. We're looking for its ability to dry down in the field naturally, as opposed to putting it through a commercial dryer. So at the end of the day, we have the cleanest, highest quality corn possible to make the best distillate possible.
Yeah.
So in addition to the corn, which, by the way, we have identified 3 very specific varietals of corn that we grow year in and year out. Guys, I'm going to send you to mommy. Okay. I'll come up and give you guys a hug. Okay. So we have 3 very specific varietals of corn that we grow year in and year out, that we designate as our whiskey corn. We also grow 100% of our own rye. We actually worked with Dave Pickerell, who introduced us to Mike Swanson up at Far North, and identified a very specific varietal of rye that we grow that is agronomically sound to grow in DeKalb. We grow our own wheat. I've been growing that same variety for the last 8 years. And since last year, we've been growing our own barley as well. So our sort of tagline is seed to spirit, and that's truly where and the way we operate. I mentioned my 2 business partners. I think one thing that's really unique about our business is that Jim Walter, who I mentioned is actively in his 52nd harvest, is an awarded master farmer. So that title is given to somebody when they are nominated by their peers to be, because they're considered, community leader. They really work on teaching the next generation, and just, very obviously are growing high quality grain very consistently. About 5 years ago, we brought on a young man by the name of Rob Wallace. And it was at that point where I sort of transitioned my distilling responsibilities over to Rob. I taught him everything that Dave taught me, and then everything I'd subsequently learned. Rob then enrolled himself into Heriot-Watt University out of Edinburgh, Scotland. and earned his master's in distillation and fermentation sciences, and did his master's thesis on how varietals of corn affect the flavor of bourbon. And so compound that with one of the products we're going to taste tonight, won a double gold at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition. We patiently gave Rob his title Master Distiller. And so I think it's kind of a fun concept to know that on our team, we have a master farmer and a master distiller. And we think that truly affects the quality of our output.
Absolutely. And this is a bottled and bond product, straight bourbon whiskey. So, yep. And how long have you guys been selling a bottled and bond?
We're coming on about a year right now, I think.
Okay.
So
very cool.
I think I've heard everyone talk about, except for Mr. Beam here. I think a lot of us had a little steeper learning curve into the bourbon industry. My roots don't go quite as deep as his. And so I'm not sure that 10 years ago, I could have told you what bottled and bond was. But once we sort of got into it and recognized the value and really, it's particularly important, I think, for craft distillers to sort of be a flag in the sand of, hey, we've been patient, we've grown up, we've let the product get to a point where we don't have to have any caveats of it's young or small barrel or anything like that. So that's why we're very proud of that. One other thing I should have mentioned on just the way we operate is our sustainability. It's very obvious that when we're growing our own, the carbon footprint from the grain traveling from the field to the fermenter is it's virtually zero, because it's in most cases less than a mile or two away. We are also 100% solar powered and have been for going on 3 years now. And we built a system to reclaim and recirculate virtually all of the water that we use. One of the things that I think was integral with Dave is we were looking into digging a deeper well. Mm-hmm. The water source that we have right now is original to the farmstead, and it has character. And Dave said, before you do anything, let's send samples off and see what you've got. And we got the results back, and he said, boys, whatever you do, don't run your well dry, because the water you're using is chemically identical to what we have in Bardstown, Kentucky. So we did a very hard pivot, and everything we do now is like I said, recirculated and recycled, and highly, highly sustainable across everything that we do.
Oh, very nice. Some great nosing notes coming in here. We'll give this a taste in just a second here. Cinnamon raisin bread, overripe fruit, yeast, some baking spice, cornbread in there, green apple, Chips Ahoy. I like that one. Caraway, and light caramel, cut grass, grape bubble gum. Perfect. Bubble yum, probably. Apple, brown sugar, caramel, graham cracker. All good stuff there. Let's give it a taste. Last one of the night. Cheers, gang.
So what we're tasting, obviously, is bottled and bond, so it's 100 proof. Our mash bill is 75% corn, 15% soft red winter wheat, and 10% malt. These are all 53-gallon, 5-year aged Kelvin cooperage, have been in the barrel for at least 5 years. Entry proof is 120 plus or minus a point. Our warehouses are old grain bins that we've converted. So this particular one is a grain bin, what we call a Quonset building. So think of like a World War II type barracks. So it's like a half barrel set on its side. Made of corrugated steel, so it gets completely exposed to all of the temperature changes that we have in DeKalb. And I can tell you the whiskey that's in this glass, in those barrels, has been as hot as 120 degrees and as cold as -35.
Wow.
So it's certainly had the weather oppressive.
Yeah, it's seen the spectrum there.
And we think that's part of our secret sauce.
Right.
And just our blend here, just the word that we like to put against everything we put in a bottle is approachable. We recognize, we're in the middle of a cornfield out in corn country in DeKalb, and a lot of our customers that are coming to us are having their first bourbon experience. And we want to make sure it's something that they can, really enjoy, whether it's on the rocks or mixed in a cocktail. And we've got other stuff that's sitting in barrels that will have some single barrel expressions that are 7, 8, 9 years old. But we've gotten to a point now that our bottled and bond expression will consistently be released.
Stayed with the bottle. David Wallace has one there. He claims you're his hometown distillery, so you're the backyard distiller for him. So
I know. Can you see? I got to see if I can. There. Here's our bottle here.
Oh, nice. Nice.
So yeah, we're proud of what we've done with this and very excited for the rest of the things that are coming out of the distillery.
Tastes, we got corn pops, sweet caramel popcorn. I put Cracker Jacks, wheat flavor coming through. Nice. Steve wants to know if you could, are you guys in Michigan by chance?
So our primary distribution is within the state of Illinois, and we've got some limited distribution in Nebraska. We also work with Sealbox, and they can ship to about 18 or 20 different states. I'm not sure if Michigan is on that list or not.
They're pretty rough when it comes to being able to ship stuff in. So I'm going to guess no on that. But Sealbox, I don't know. They figured out a way to get around some things. So maybe
they went as close to the mothership of the United States as possible it's
exactly.
It's this weird workaround, but they figured it out.
They figured it out for sure. All right. Well, yes, another great addition here. Really excellent whiskey, and hopefully everyone appreciates that. So good stuff. And what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Q&A. This is your time to ask questions. You can open up your mics, folks. Feel free to ask anybody on the panel or the entire panel, or pick and choose. But feel free to ask a question live, or you can put it in chat if you're shy, and I'll ask it for you. Anybody got anything?
I'll start by putting a big shout out, thank you to Dave of Wyoming Whiskey, because I remember trying my first bottle out here in New York, probably 2019, 2020. And I liked what I tasted, and I wrote you a note saying I liked what I tasted, and you actually wrote me back and we talked about it a bit. And to have somebody respond like that was very nice. And I still appreciate it, and I'm still buying the bottles. It's very good stuff. So thank you.
There you go,
Very
David.
welcome. Thank you, Carl.
Nice compliment there for sure. What else does anybody want to know?
Well, I was born and raised in Nebraska, and I know you ship it to Nebraska, but I went to the University of Nebraska, but now I live in California. Can I buy it in California, even though since I was raised in Nebraska? Give me a little help here.
Are you talking to me?
I'm talking to anybody. I want to buy a bottle of this.
Well, you can get Yellowstone, so that's out there.
Yeah,
And I'm pretty sure that the Sealbox ships to.
acres.
I'm pretty sure Sealbox ships to California.
I'm sure they do too. California, you should be able to get the Sealbox one. So that's SEELBACHS Sealbox. Check them out, Paul, and they should be able to hook you up.
I mean, you've had 4 absolutely great bourbons tonight. This is fantastic. Thank you.
It's a good show. Yes.
Pat said to send them to Michigan.
Oh,
you can ship them to Michigan once you get them.
Yeah, sure. You want to get in that game for sure. Forward to Michigan. Any other questions?
Hey, Steve, I got a question for Alex.
Sure.
Yeah, Alex, what equipment are you running that rye whiskey on?
We have a continuous column still from Vendome. Well, like I said, here's the deal, right? So to keep my overheads as low as possible, I've been using somebody else's continuous column still. And, that's the way we've built this business. That was a smart way to do it, I thought, considering, you kind of got to play the hand you're dealt in this business. And with the financial constraints that you have, you go for it, however you can. And so, yeah, continuous column still from Vendome. We started using one in Warwick, New York. And then a couple of years ago, we switched over to one near Poughkeepsie. Same equipment, slightly thinner column on the second one, but same product, using the same specs. So that's what we're doing.
Very nice. Tony had a great comment on there. Tony Friend said, 4 great whiskeys. He never tried any of these, which that's what this is all about. This series is about introducing you to new whiskeys. And sometimes I will get a note from a distillery and be like, hey, we only sell in this market or whatever. But these bourbon fans, we do travel and we do use our networks to get us bottles and stuff. So it's a good opportunity to reach out and expand your business. And the folks here do mail order when they can and stuff like that. So yeah, it's cool to be able to try some different things. It's a great way to get introduced to them. So I love it. Other questions? I know Adina had a question, so I can't believe she's not chiming in here. She told me she had one beforehand. Adina, you might lose your chance here if you don't get in.
I'll ask him afterwards, because it's
If
not about
he
the
sticks
whiskey.
around. If he sticks around.
Are you sticking around, Nick?
We can't promise anybody sticking around.
I could stick around, sure.
Okay.
Okay.
The commitment is 6 more
It's
minutes.
not whiskey related.
It's about vodka.
Oh, then I'm not sticking around. Yeah.
So I have one more for Alex. I think we covered everybody else as far as the distribution. It's where they sell product at. Alex, are you just local or
distribution?
Distribution. I've been drinking for a while.
We distribute all over the place.
All right.
That's going to be the name of my distributor, Distributation.
Yeah, you know.
It's a good question. We're actually currently in 6 states. New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Kentucky, we just tackled, and California. We're just getting rolling in most of those. Obviously, I'm kind of more focused on New York and New Jersey and Connecticut, the states contiguous with New York. But we had great success in Kentucky recently and also in California. It is worth mentioning that if you go to our website, forthamilton.com, we can ship you booze via a third party to anywhere in America. So feel free to check out the website, forthamilton.com, and we can help you out. So the shorter answer is we can get you booze wherever you want.
I like to hear that because we're in Michigan and we don't hear that very often.
Got you covered.
Never.
There you go. There you go. There's a workaround. All right. And Paul, sounds like they're going to be out in California. So pick up the Hamilton. Get it. What else? Couple minutes left here. Any other questions? All right. Well,
so what was that net place I can order this stuff at? Give that to me again.
Yeah, it's called Sealbox. It's sealbox.com, and that's SEELBACHS.com.
Great.
There you go.
Because I'm going to be on Sunday. I'm going to be 7/9. And my memory isn't so good as it used to be. Okay,
Wow.
thank you.
79. All right. Well,
yeah.
Thank you for coming on and being part of these. That's cool. Very cool. All right. I
plan to be here till I'm 90. So.
All right. We'll probably be doing these till that long too. So we'll hang in there with us. Okay. All right. Well, great job tonight. Well, let's hear a round of applause for all 4 of our distillery representatives. They did a great job. They were great guests, answered our questions, and of course, brought us some great whiskey, the most important thing. And on that note, we will say goodbye again to our home audience here who are watching along, whether you're watching on YouTube, you just happen to stumble across this, or you bought the sets and you couldn't make it tonight. We'll say goodbye to you, and thanks for coming out. I will stick around. Our guest, you can stick around if you like. You do not have to. We appreciate and respect your time, and thanks so much for being part of this. Goodbye.
Thank you all. Thanks.